Hi, you guys, and welcome back to the podcast.
We are the Carwells.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Sarah, and we are, as you know, Airbnb interior designers and investors.
Alrighty, guys. Well, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a special guest, Rose, here today. She is a fellow Midwesterner, so super excited to have you here, Rose. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, just to get this out of the way, guys, Sarah is having some connection problems, so she is not going to be on today's episode. So I'm taking the reins on this one, but let's get into it. So, Rose, like I said before, we start every episode with an Airbnb horror story, and you have a lot of experience. So if you have a story to tell, go ahead.
Good. So one of our properties sits on a private lake, which is pretty special. It is a 19-acre property and a 2-acre private lake. So there's no other houses. You're not sharing that lake with anybody. And we had a group of guests. It was within our first year or so of hosting people there. And they were younger and they were Airbnb. And they were having a lot of liquid refreshments while they were staying with us. And after they checked out, we were doing our clean and our turnover. And I was looking in the pond, and there were all these shiny things at the bottom of the pond. They had been standing on the dock and like shotgunning beer and poking a hole in the bottom, drinking it, and then throwing it out into the pond. Now, the pond that we have was actually dug as a quarry for clay, and that they took to a clay factory where they made bricks. And so our pond is really deep. It gets down to 20, 25 feet, which is really deep for a private pond. Mm-hmm. And so we had probably like 20 or 30 beer cans sitting at the bottom of the pond. Now, our pond is very clean. You can see to the bottom. And so we had to spend a very long time fishing all of these beer cans out from the bottom of the lake because you could see them from the surface. And that was not a good look. Those people were not welcome back. And so that was probably one of the worst things that we got from an Airbnb guest. I mean, the house was okay. Things were a little messy, but that's not the kind of thing that you can prepare for, fishing 30 beer cans out from 20 to 25 feet underwater.
Oh my gosh. That's so frustrating to have somebody be so disrespectful of your space. Now, I am the kind of person who, if I see people littering in public, I get really upset about it. Littering is rude in general, but to do it at somebody's home and to throw it in a pond, like you said it's clear to the bottom. They don't know if there's wildlife in there that's going to be affected by it. Nothing. That is so disrespectful to somebody's home. I'm so sorry. That's so frustrating.
Yes.
Yeah. So you were mentioning before we got on that you no longer use Airbnb because of that experience.
I don't. So, when you go on AirDNA or these different tools, it can tell you what percentage of properties in a particular area are listed on Airbnb, Vrbo, and both. And our area it's actually like 60-40 Vrbo Airbnb, which is kind of interesting. If you go to different cities around us, that balance is a little different. But when we were listed on both of those sites, and this was before we were turning into a book direct company, we were on both. And I gotta say, across the board, the quality of the guests that we were getting from Airbnb was significantly lower. They always wanted a discount. And in my experience, people looking for a discount are not shopping at their price point. And so they will often have unrealistic expectations, especially if you say no to the discount. They left our properties messier, dirtier, and at least at the time, the platform, I don't know how it is now, I didn't feel like it was as user-friendly. I really want to get that signed rental agreement, and there isn't a way of doing that on Airbnb. You have to message people off platform, which is hard when you don't have their real email address. And also the people reserving on Airbnb, they push back against, I don't want to sign a rental agreement. And that is not something as a business person and as a person who owns all of their own rental homes, I'm not okay with that. So when we expanded into a new, bigger, even more expensive property, we decided to test the waters and just do Verbo and Book Direct and just see how that went. And our calendar filled
Yeah.
just fine. So at that point, we closed up our Airbnb listing. I still get messages on there, and I tell people, "Oh, I only reserve direct or on Verbo, and you're welcome to head over there and do that." But we have been able to make that transition. We do a lot of book direct off of our website and repeat guests, and then we also
Yeah.
use Verbo.
Yeah, Airbnb is nice for, I guess, the convenience factor, right? It's probably the most well-known platform. And so it's nice because it's easy to put it on there and just get bookings, right? But that also means that most people are using that platform. So even the bad guests are going to be using the Airbnb platform more than they're probably going to be using Verbo or like booking direct with you. Unfortunately, I think that's starting to transition
Mm-hmm.
a little bit. People are, as the industry gets larger, people are kind of trying to push more into direct bookings, like more on their platform, and then use Airbnb and Verbo a little bit. But we actually have another
Mm-hmm.
person that we have had on the podcast, and we've been on social media with her for a while, Marilyn, and she swears by her rental agreement. She will not let
Mm-hmm.
anybody stay unless they're willing to sign a rental agreement. And she has been in the industry for a really long time. And she was like, that's not something I'm going to push on. I need everything in writing that they're going to make sure that my space is nice. And she just won't book somebody if they're not willing.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
non-negotiable for us. I mean, we have high value rentals, and I'll give you that, but $3,000 isn't worth it to me, to have somebody in the house who may do damage or is not, protecting us legally. That's not worth it. Like, that even doesn't even come close to covering the kind of damage that somebody could do. I mean, honestly,
Hmm.
that's not even a couch. So I mean, that's a non-negotiable. But I think as we expand as an industry and we professionalize more, that we are also educating our guests as to what the expectation is. And I hope that we are moving in a more positive direction from that, because a rental agreement, in my opinion, it's a non-negotiable. It must be signed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good idea to have something like that in place. Absolutely. So,
Hmm.
but as we get into this, for anybody who doesn't know who you are or your journey, could you give us like a quick intro to you, your background in real estate and short-term rentals specifically?
Absolutely. So, again, my name is Rose, and my company's name is Your Family's Place, because we want to be your family's go-to place for a vacation, the getaway. We're located in Ohio. We have more rural properties, but just because they're rural does not mean that they are very hard to get to. Sometimes rural is code for, an hour or so on a 2-lane road or maybe some gravel. Like, that's not going to happen. We've been very specific in selecting our locations, so that all of our properties are no more than 7 minutes off of the freeway and only 2 turns. So if you've ever gone on back roads, you take a right, you take a left, you look for this sign, you look for that sign, and it can be frustrating and overwhelming, and at night, really hard. So when we were looking for locations, we were very specific, and we did not deviate from that idea that we wanted to hug that highway so that people could get to our properties easily. Now, just because we're close to the highway, though, doesn't mean that they are not getting that full rustic experience. So part of our brand is providing a large house, but also with a big acreage around it. So when our guests get back to their properties, they're the only ones there. They don't see any neighbors. They don't see anybody else. And so they have complete privacy back at our properties. Our smallest house, it accommodates 14, and it has 15 acres. Our next house, it has a main house, which can do 14, and then you can add on a guest house for 6 more. So 20 people there. That has 19 acres. And we are under construction now on our biggest property. The main house sleeps 16. There is a loft apartment over the garage for 6 more. And then we are building a standalone You could call it a honeymoon cottage. It's called the conservatory. So it's designed, I'm kind of pushing my comfort zone with the design. It's designed as like a Victorian conservatory. And it's meant to be a couple space because we pull a lot of people from wedding venues and they need a place for the couple to stay. Um, and that property is on 32 acres. So that is part of our brand, is having that big, not only the big house, but the big space around the house. So that when you get back there, it's just you and the space. And that helps us sometimes with neighbor issues. You don't have to worry about your neighbor power washing and ruining your vacation or anything. Yeah, tough break on that one. And so the reason why we've focused on this niche is because we have a big family ourselves. We have 6 kids, and they are very close in age. Haven't slept in 13 years. So we have 6 kids in less. We had 6 kids in 11 years. Yeah, and yeah, yeah. I'm not sure what else to say about that. Like, yes, I know how that happens. I do. And my husband is very good looking, but yes.
My mom, there's 4 kids in our family, and my oldest sister is 32, and then my brother is about to turn 27. So there's all of us are really close in age as well. It's
Yes.
super fun growing up like that. I love
So
families like that.
I think sometimes my kids are very happy that there's a lot of them. Sometimes they're not. I think the person who is suffering the most is my daughter, because she was born first. And I tried very hard to give her a sister. Unfortunately, I made 5 boys in a row.
Oh my
So
goodness.
yes.
Well, she's very
So I
successful
tried.
then.
I tried. You tell I didn't try. I tried very hard. But so having a big family makes vacation way more complicated.
Oh, yeah.
We find it so difficult to find a rental that's big enough for us, because when we travel, we also want to go with my parents. We want to go with my sister and her kids. So now we're talking 14 people. We have a dog. My sister has a dog. 14 people plus 2 dogs. I mean, that kind of math is really hard to pull off in a vacation rental. So we wanted to create spaces that we would be able to go to and enjoy, hoping that other people would be having that same experience. So that's sort of our journey of how we got to this spot. Both my husband and I do this as our full-time job. He used to have a different career, and I was glad that we were able to retire him from that career. And now we work on this together. So it's a family business through and through.
That is awesome. That's so cool because I was going to ask about like the niche that you're in, and it's cool that you've created a space where you will also, like, you would choose to also vacation there. There's 6 people in our family, and even like with my parents, and even that was always kind of difficult finding a place to stay, because like hotel rooms, there's usually 2 queen beds, and so a couple of us were always on the floor and things like that. So it was always really difficult finding that. And then my mom has 11 siblings, so there's just
Mm-hmm.
like big families. I totally understand that. So as far as like creating the spaces that you would want to stay at, do you use this as a lifestyle aspect as well? Do you go and stay at these properties, or do you live close enough to them where you don't necessarily go and stay at them?
Yeah, so we're local to all of our properties, and I think
Okay.
that gives us a good competitive edge, because there are things that local people know and can do that a big management company, they just simply can't pull off. And so we've made that part of our brand, is that we want spaces and an guest experience that makes our guests feel like they're coming to their friend's house, or they have that kind of soft Midwest landing. And so by being local to our properties and living in the area, we can tell them, you need to go to this coffee shop on Saturday morning. It's the only day of the week that they have this special croissant, and it's so good you have to go there. It's that kind of very local knowledge. Or you need a photographer to come to your home, to come to the vacation home to take family pictures while we're there. No problem. I know all the local photographers, and I can hook you up with the right person. Or you want a restaurant recommendation. Well, what kind of food do you want? Here's the best barbecue place. Here's the best brewery. You want to go to a winery with music. You need to go here. Since we live local to our properties, we have that kind of granular knowledge that can help curate the experience for our guests that makes them feel like they're coming to their own second home.
Yeah.
And that's part of that branding experience. It's not just a logo, it's not just a name. A big part of building a brand is a feeling. And we want people to feel like this is their place to go on vacation. And that part of that long game there is building those repeat bookings that hopefully come back to us directly.
Absolutely. You created an entire experience for your guests instead of just a place where they can sleep, which is really, really
Yes,
nice. We
absolutely.
I have a quick question for the back end for anybody who's looking to get into this space because we've had another
Yes.
person on who sleeps 16 in one property. What is the
Mhm.
back end like cleaning, setting up, all of that supplies and stuff look like when you're hosting that many people?
Yes. So we use technology. We are leveraging different technology to make our jobs easier. We do use Breezeway as a way of managing supplies and scheduling and all of that kind of stuff. And that has certainly helped because in the past, it would just be me having to remember everything in here.
Oh.
One of the things that we always plan, we always think about is how to set up the properties so that they can be turned over. I hate the word quickly because sometimes that suggests a lower quality, but how to do it efficiently because
Mhm.
each turnover has to be perfect. Each guest's stay has to be like they were the first people there. So there's a design aspect to putting together houses so that they can be turned over quickly. So here's an example of something that I didn't think about until I had been doing this for a couple of years. We have different size beds in some of our properties. So at our lodge property, we have a king, we have two fulls, and then we have three queens. One of the things that I did to save time was I put different types of sheets or different color sheets on different size beds. Now that's a small nuance that I didn't quite get, but when all of my sheets were white, is this a twin? Is this a full? Is this a queen? I don't know. And that was a time sink for me. And so one of the things that we've done, like with linens, I don't feel like I have to have white linens because I'm not a hotel and I'm not trying to create a hotel feel. So at Mount Pleasant Lodge, it is meant to feel like summer camp, but elevated,
Mhm.
comfortable, all of the nostalgia associated with being at summer camp, but comfortable beds, a nice kitchen, and all of the finishes. So the linens that we chose for there are actually a jersey knit, and because it feels like a sweatshirt. And if you're at
Mhm.
camp, you're wearing a comfy sweatshirt, you're being all cozy. And so we matched the linens to the feel of the home. Now, at our other property, the cottage at Maple Pond, it's designed as an up north lake cottage, like if you're in Michigan or Minnesota or Maine. So the linens there, that was not a place where you wanted to feel like you were wearing a sweatshirt. You wanted something crisper because that was more on brand for the style of the house. So what I actually did there, we had two different size beds. I got sheets that have a classic pinstripe on them. What's nice about pinstripes is that they always go in one direction from the head to the foot. So I know when I'm making the beds, this is the direction that the sheets go on. Now that's a very little granular decision, but that decision right there saves a lot of time when you are making 8 to 10 beds.
Mhm.
You have everything ready to go. You have everything stocked, folded the same way every time, so you can pull it out and you know this is the direction that the sheets go. This is the direction that the duvet goes. So sometimes it's just those small little decisions that you can make ahead of time that set you up for success when you're turning over big properties.
Yeah, it's funny that you say the different colored sheets because Sarah actually had started doing that in her property, and I don't
Mhm.
know if she just saw it somewhere or if she just started doing it, but it makes so much sense. in your head, you're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. We can just like look at it
Yeah.
and we'll figure out the size. But when somebody's trying to get this turned over before the next guest checks in, and you still want it to be the same quality, right? But you do have a specific time block that you can't go
Mm-hmm.
over. So you need
Mm-hmm.
to have like, even just a couple minutes makes a difference, especially for your cleaners. And do you guys clean the properties or do you have a team that you hire to
So
go out?
we do have a team of cleaners, but I am always on site doing the cleaning with them. And then I
Okay.
do, Breezeway has an inspection function, then I do all the inspections afterwards. So I'm participating in the cleanings along with them. So I'm there on site. We also have a handyman that does all of our exterior maintenance because we have a lot of things outside of the properties, hammocks and canoes and kayaks and fire pits. Those have to be looked at, checked, make sure they're safe every single time. So we
Mm-hmm.
also have somebody who does all of our exterior work as well. My husband works more on the financial side of things. He deals with the income coming out, paying the invoices, that kind of stuff. And that by itself is a full-time job.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Sarah's
Mhm.
like, even in our business, Sarah's the more like front person. She's more hands on, and I'm the one, I'm essentially your husband. I'm like behind the scenes, checking all the emails, making sure everything gets
Mhm.
paid, that kind of stuff. It really can be a full time job. It's so nice to see, though, that you're so hands on because some people will get into this industry and they want to be hands off, right? They want to make it as
Mhm.
passive as possible and they're not trying to be there at the cleanings. They just want to hire somebody to do it. But there is still people who want to be just as hands on as you're being. And it's nice to see that even with such large properties, you still do have the time to make sure that you're at the cleanings and you're doing the inspections and you're taking the time out to do that because it creates a more luxury experience and a better experience for your guests, in my opinion, because it shows that you care so much about how everything is done to create that experience for them.
Mhm. And I have that granular knowledge of what's happening in the properties and where things are. So if a guest has a question on, where the clothes steamer is, it's in this closet, upper right-hand corner, black box. And I
Mm-hmm.
have that kind of knowledge of what's happening so that if guests do have a question, I know the answer. And if I don't know the answer, I can track it down very, very quickly. I
Yeah.
will say one of the things that makes us a little different than some other properties is that we don't do same day turnovers.
Oh, okay.
And so that there are some things that we do and some beliefs that I have that I know run contrary to what other people in the industry feel like. For example, we don't do same day turnovers, and there's two reasons. Number one, it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of work, and so that becomes a quality of life decision for me as the owner of my own company. It's me and my husband. Well, again, we have all of these kids. We have to work on managing our lifestyle so that it works for us. So by not doing same day turnovers, it gives us some space in our schedule to get the things done. But also with big houses, it takes time to do that. And so
Totally.
we make sure that we have our dynamic pricing dialed in as much as possible so that we can, make the revenue that we need for our lifestyle and for our business without having to push ourselves crazy for all of those same day turnovers. So that I know some people want to open up and they have 100% occupancy. You can certainly have a discussion about whether or not 100% occupancy, 90% occupancy, whether that's even good for you, because that's a lot of wear and tear on your property. And you want your properties to flow money and be an asset, money flowing asset. But if you are, hitting that really high occupancy rate, that does come at a cost to the care and maintenance of the property. And so if you are at 100% occupancy, I would say good for you. Um, but you might want to look at your pricing. A lot of more traditional hospitality industry, they are not shooting for 100% because of the wear and tear on the property. And so you need to look at your pricing to see whether you are priced appropriately, because you could make the same or better revenue with a lower occupancy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice that you have that option, right? That this industry is so great because you get to choose how you want to run your business. You get to choose, okay, my ADR might be higher so that I can make sure that I can have those times in between, and you get to choose how everything is run. That's one of the best parts I think about this is there's so much freedom to choose how
Hmm.
you decide to run your business specifically, because some people might not think of short-term rental, like each individual property as a business, but it really is. They're their own functioning business that different people are coming into. And so it's a really nice way to be able to choose how you run it. But
Hmm.
why did you choose short-term rentals specifically instead of
Hmm.
going with the long-term rental route? I mean, I know obviously cash flow is a really nice thing about it, but just
Yes.
the time that short-term rentals takes, because there's so many guests coming in and out. Why did you make the decision to go with short-term rentals?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Short-term rentals they generate more revenue, which is great. I will say more from the selfish side, it's much more creative and fun to put together a short-term rental, but it's also about curating that whole experience that you can't pull that off in a long-term rental. You aren't curating somebody's experience in their own home. So one of the things that I think back to is what led me into this industry was my experience growing up with going on vacation with my family. Uh, a lot of families, sometimes as time passes, they pull apart as people grow up and have different interests. One of the things that our family always did was take little vacations together. We would take a big vacation in the summer, but we would spend weekends, going to a little cabin here or visiting this place. And it wasn't big and it wasn't fancy. But those types of um, experiences were kind of like gravity pulling us together, and having that time and those experiences together. I look back now on people that aren't with us anymore, and I have such warm memories of our time spent together. Vacation for a lot of families is the highlight of their year. It's maybe the
Mhm.
only time that they're getting together as a whole group. And there's so much warm, fuzzy feeling around that. I get to be a part of that.
Mhm.
I get to create that for other families who might not have been together for a couple of years, especially with COVID. People didn't see each other for so long, and now they're finally getting back together. I've always loved welcoming friends into our home and hosting them. And this is just sort of an extension of my desire for other people to have that warm, cozy, memory making feeling. And I know that that drew our family closer together. And I really take a deep satisfaction from knowing that our guests enjoyed their time with their family. Don't get me wrong, depositing the checks is really nice, but there is something deeper to it than that. It really matters to me personally that they are having a good time with their family, that they're creating those memories, and that I get to be a part of it. That just it feels very fulfilling for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of going off of our questions here, but we talked before
Mhm.
this about you really loving the design aspect as well and being very
Mhm.
particular about designing your properties. How do you use design to create an experience for people? Because that's something that Sarah and I really focus on, especially when we're designing for other people or when we were designing for other people and now with our own properties. So, how do you use that to create a
Yeah.
more or a better experience for your guests?
Yeah. So first of all, and I'm pretty sure that I'm preaching to the choir with this, design pays off. Absolutely, it pays off. And when I'm thinking about design and I'm thinking about a property, the first thing I think about is what is the person that would live here? What is the feel of this property? And so when I was doing Mount Pleasant Lodge, it's a log home. It's logged on the exterior, but the interior walls are drywall, which for me is a good balance because sometimes log and wood homes they're just too woody, and
Mhm.
that can kind of box you in. I wanted to create a rustic space, but I also didn't want to hang dead animals on the wall or have cute little bears holding the toilet paper. That type of design, it might be your style, and that's great. You should do what works for you. Um, but it's very common. And I
Mhm.
wanted to take rustic in a different direction. So part of our business is evoking feelings. And so when I'm thinking about rustic design, I'm thinking about feelings. I'm putting together more this idea of maybe like the Adirondack camps. So how were the Adirondack camps designed. So then I'll go to the library and I'll get a bunch of books on Adirondacks and the camps and just flip through them and try to understand what the essence of that design would be. And then what parts of that design work for me. So for example, all of the beds in Mount Pleasant Lodge have a quilt at the bottom. The quilts at the bottom, they're actually hand crocheted by a friend of mine who agreed to do the project before she understood how big it was going to be. Uh, but those quilts at the bottom of the bed are all designed to be like Pendleton blankets. Like if you know about Pendleton wool
Mhm.
blankets, they have a national park series and they have colors that they kind of assign to each national park. Now Pendleton blankets are like $700.
Mhm.
That I'm not gonna put that. I wouldn't necessarily buy that for me, and I'm not gonna put that in the house. But we designed those quilts, those crocheted blankets, to match the national parks. So I have really great texture, I have really great color, but then I have something that looks classic. Like a Pendleton wool blanket is classic.
Mhm.
And so I'm trying to pull these different elements of the design to create a feeling. And so that's how I talk about Mount Pleasant Lodge as summer camp, but elevated. So think about the summer camps in the Adirondacks, but elevated.
Mhm.
And so that's sort of where I come from when I'm doing design. But another part of design that's really important is having something that's kid friendly. And I did this sort of intentionally out of my own need to survive with my children. But I found that our guests were picking up on it. Our design is made so there aren't a lot of nicky-nacky things everywhere that kids can pick up and break. And that's my own house is like that. I'm not a nicky-nacky person, but also knickknacks have to be dusted in between each stay. And that's a time sink right there.
Oh yeah.
So, like this fall, we have pumpkins all over our property, but our pumpkins are all fabric pumpkins. That gives great texture.
Mhm.
You can get them in lots of different colors. You can reuse them year after year, so you're not buying all new pumpkins. But if kids touch them, pick them up, drop them, they're not breaking anything.
Yep.
So when families are in the homes, moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas don't have to worry about what their kids are touching. And
That's
it was part of that was unintentional because my own kids are in the space and they touch everything. But our guests were picking up on that. Now, when I did the cottage at Maple Pond, I wanted it to feel like that up North Lake cottage. So same kind of thing. I look at books, I look at pictures, I find artists that already live in the area I'm trying to evoke. I found an artist up outside of Traverse City who does a lot of watercolors, and he paints his watercolors off of nature scenes up in that area. I probably bought 50 of his pictures and I have them all over the cottage because that's the feeling that I want to evoke. I do think when it comes to design that the more successful houses have something to say. They're not just another house.
Mhm.
They're people are spending good money to stay at these places. They don't want to spend good money to stay at a house that's just like their house.
Mhm. That's just thrown
Um,
together.
yeah, it's just like, well, this is just my house in a different place. So I
Mhm.
think having that design element is what makes a space special. And
Yeah.
then when you can evoke some of these more, um, the feeling of summer camp, the feeling of the up North Lake cottage. In our pantheon, we know what that feels like emotionally. And so I'm trying to create that in the space.
Mhm.
And there's a lot that goes into it. And people sometimes stick their nose up at the designer, just say, "Oh, isn't it so much fun to just shop for all of this stuff?" No, but everything that goes into the house is a decision. Nothing arrived in the house by accident. And so
Absolutely.
everything is a decision.
Mhm.
And as the designer, you have to make sure that that matches the vision of the house, it works for the guests, and that, it's beautiful in the space.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's just little decisions that need to be made when you're designing because it you want it to look beautiful, but it also needs to be efficient. It's like you were saying, designing to help the cleaning process go faster. There are certain
Hmm.
things like I would love to have a fluffy rug in my living room,
Yep.
but if we're going to be pet friendly, that's not realistic. And fluffy rugs, as people walk on them, they get matted down. In your own
Hmm.
home, you can brush it up as many times as you want, or you just replace the rug after a while. But when so many people are coming in and out, that's not realistic. So we go with ruggable rugs because they're machine washable. Pick up the
Hmm.
top layer and just toss it in. But like jute rugs, we tried to do jute rugs for a while because they
Yeah,
add
they look great,
texture,
but
they look great.
yeah,
The cleaners were like, these are impossible to clean, they take us
yeah, they
forever to
are.
clean. And so now we're like, okay, as much as I love a jute rug, I think it looks so good, it creates like a boho vibe in there. We don't
Hmm.
use jute rugs anymore. We don't use light colored fabrics on our couches or our headboards or things where people are going to be
Hmm.
touching them constantly.
Yeah,
So it's not just making it look beautiful. There are very specific decisions that have to be made because it is a short-term rental and because there are so many people coming in and out of the space constantly. And I don't think people understand that. It's very different from designing your own home.
it's very different than designing your own home. Absolutely. And everything, like I said, everything is there on purpose.
Hmm.
Nothing is an accident
Yeah.
unless the guest left something that was a surprise to you. But everything is there on purpose. And if you were the person designing it, then you made that choice.
Hmm.
And no, your mom didn't tell you what to do.
Yeah.
um, you made that choice, and everything is intentional, and everything goes into the overall feeling of the house.
Yeah.
And that takes real time, effort, and work to make that happen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you are currently in Ohio for all of your properties in
Yes.
rural areas, but like you said, you're in like a very specific, just off the highway. Do you Are those the markets that you plan to continue investing in, or are that's what you prefer right now, or do you plan on, I guess, expanding into different types of markets, or do you think you'll stick with that kind of niche?
Hmm. So we are right now under construction on our next home, and construction is a very draining process.
Yes.
And so after we complete this one, I have to take a break. I have to gather myself. And then we are actually looking at moving into other areas where we know the area, we know people who live there, and expanding our brand. So one of the things that we did early on was we trademarked our company name. So we own it within the state of Ohio, which is where we are, but we also have a trademark on it. And so that gives us more protection and viability to move into other markets. So, we talked about how I love Michigan. And I definitely, having gone there every year for 35 years, I know that the rental market there is not as sophisticated yet, at least in the areas that we try to vacation at.
Yeah.
And part of that is because people have their family homes where they would have, whole bunk rooms with like 10 people in it.
Hmm.
And maybe a house is for 20 people, but there's only two bathrooms. Like, no,
Yeah.
that's not the experience that we're trying to create. So I know you guys are really bullish on the Michigan market, and I feel in a very similar way. I would like to move up into northern Michigan, specifically more on the Lake Huron side, because it seems to have a little better seasonality.
Hmm.
So you have the summer people coming up, maybe going to Mackinac Island. There's so many open spaces with state parks and all of that kind of stuff. But then there is also the flip side of that. In the winter, they have a lot of snowmobiling and stuff like that. Price wise, I feel like the Lake Huron side is more reasonable. Once you get over to the Lake Michigan side, you're talking Charlevoix, you're talking Petoskey.
Hmm.
That area is beautiful, but it's much pricier on that side.
Yep.
I
Absolutely.
love it over there, but I also, I have money that I have to be careful with. So
Yep.
I think that the Sheboygan side, the Lake Huron side, would be the area where we would like to move into next to create your family's place north. And that would allow us to create a branded experience in line with what we're already doing, but in another location. So I think that
Mhm.
there is a lot of opportunity for beautifully designed houses that are well maintained and taken care of with privacy that will be able to also be successful at the price point that we like to shoot for up in that northern Michigan area.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I'm sure people have heard Sarah and I talk about this constantly. But like you said, it's a lot of the houses that are up north in Michigan are people's rental or like not even rental homes, just vacation homes
Just
for their
their
families.
family's home.
And
Yeah.
when you're just having it for your family, you really do just throw whatever furniture you can in there because 99% of the time you guys are going up there and then you're all going out and doing stuff and it's more about being together than you're not creating a business, right? So
Hmm.
there isn't really a lot of well-designed places for people to just go and
Nope.
vacation. In lower Michigan, it's a lot there's a lot more and it's still not like a tapped market as far as like compared to like Gatlinburg, Scottsdale, Florida, things
Hmm.
like that. Michigan is very untapped, but there still is a lot more. And northern Michigan, there's just not really great places for people to stay.
There
And
isn't.
if I'm being completely honest,
There isn't.
yeah, I did not even think about the Lake Huron side because I am from the Lake Michigan side. Didn't
Hmm.
even register in my mind. I was like, I've never been to Lake Huron. I have like a couple friends from that side, but I was like, I'm not even going to look because I don't know anything about that side. And then I found
Hmm.
this property that I just closed on, and it's on a bay going into Lake Huron. And I've talked to a couple of my friends. They're like, oh my gosh, my family goes there all the time. And I was like, I didn't
Hmm.
even know that people went there. And I'm from
Hmm.
Michigan. And so and now that I talk to more people, they're like, yeah, we just like can never find places for our family to stay in northern Michigan on the Lake Huron side. And you're right, the pricing is significantly better on that side. The
Hmm.
Petoskey, the Charlevoix over near Torch Lake, it's all
Yeah.
extremely
Sutton's Bay.
expensive.
Hey, if
Yeah,
I had $2 million to drop, Sutton's Bay would be great. But
right. That would be so
no.
nice.
But
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I love some Torch Lake, but those houses are just insanely expensive to get onto that lake. And really, in Michigan specifically, you want to be at least close to a lake for a vacation.
Yes.
That's what people vacation for in Michigan is to like go to the lake in the summer and then they ice fish in the winter or they snowmobile, they go
They
skiing,
snowmobile.
stuff like that.
But the Lake
So,
Huron side is much more established with snowmobiling than the
yes.
Lake Michigan side. Now, the Lake Michigan side, you have a little bit more skiing, you have
Mhm.
Crystal Mountain and that kind of stuff. But also, if you're more on the Lake Huron side, you're not that far from Boyne Mountain. Well, that's, close to Charlevoix. You have Boyne Mountain. Um, my sister likes to ski at Nub's Knob, and so there are
Oh,
some
yep.
ski places over on the Lake Huron side, but just that price difference, once you cross 75, there's a big price difference right there.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think it really is, it is untapped. And
Mhm.
while there are a good number of rentals up there, and I don't want to upset anybody who is up there with a rental, I'm making a very broad, general statement here. They're not as nice as
Yeah.
what more developed markets see.
It's okay. Sarah and I say all the time they look like grandma's house.
They do, they do. But here, as long as people are willing to spend the money to stay there, they'll keep doing it. There's
Oh,
no
absolutely.
there's no reason for them to change.
Yeah, and it can look like grandma's house and still be a nice place to stay. We are not saying at all that these are not nice places, but we just focus more on the design aspect and that's why I think the market is changing in that way. As more come available, people are going to want to stay at places that are better designed and so that's just kind of
Hmm.
how it is. But yeah, I'm very excited to see in the next few years how the northern Michigan market kind of turns up because so many people now are saying, well, I just feel like there's not a lot up there. Maybe that's like a place that we should start getting into. And I'm like, we're getting into it now because I just know it's
Hmm.
going to explode. I feel like Michigan is the Midwest in general, but Michigan is this gem that people haven't really gone to yet. And now people are starting to come to Michigan to vacation and people are finding out that it's a really beautiful place to be, and so it's gonna start becoming like a major vacation destination in the next
Absolutely.
5 to 10 years. I can
Oh
really
yeah.
see that happening.
We stay in the Sleeping Bear Dunes area. We've done that every year for 35 years. Started when I was very young. And my grandparents actually took my mother um, back in the 1950s. They stayed at a little, shack on a river. So it was the same. It's the same place that we've always stayed. And I've definitely noticed over the last couple of years, like that area around Sleeping Bear Dunes has really become much more touristy, much busier. Beaches have more people. I'm not going to say it's busy because it's not like Florida or anything, but
Mhm.
there's just more people than there used to be. But what we didn't see during that time period was an increase in the quality of the rentals that were available. The number of rentals went up, but the quality didn't. And there are some people that are charging super premium prices, even more than what I charge. And what they're delivering to their guests is uh, subpar at the least.
Yeah.
And so there are some people that are charging big money. And as long as people are willing to pay for it, they aren't going to change. But it's not it's not a good look.
Yeah. I think as more people get into it, and I don't want people to be pushed out of this industry. If people are continuing to be successful, that's fantastic for them, but I want good hosts to be in this industry because that brings more validity to the short-term rental industry because there's kind of a stigma against it at this point in time. And so I want the good hosts to be successful and the bad hosts to kind of be pushed back a little bit because it brings a bad reputation. And so
Absolutely.
I want more people who are going to be creating greater experiences. People are like, aren't you going to create your own competition by telling people about these markets? And I'm like, I want good hosts to be here. I'm not buying every house
Yes.
that's up here and turning it into a short term rental. I can't afford that. But if other good hosts come into the market, yes, we're competing against each other in a sense. But if we're all doing well, that's fine by me.
Absolutely. And there's plenty of opportunity to do that up there. Like we
Yeah.
stayed at a home this summer up there in the Sleeping Bear Dunes area where it was a very small house. Um, it supposedly slept 20 people, but there were two bathrooms
Ooh.
um, for 20 people. While we were there a couple days into staying there, this really loud alarm went off. My husband went into the utility room and it said like septic warning.
Oh no.
So we called the owner and said, there's this really loud alarm going off. It says septic. He goes, oh, it means the septic system is full and it needs to get pumped. Like, okay, what are we going to do about this? Well, don't everybody shower. Like, this is a home for 20 people. And your answer is don't shower.
Oh my goodness. What?
And that place is rented for almost $800 a night
Oh my goodness.
every day over the summer.
That is crazy. I mean, people keep booking it, I guess, but our Sarah and our my rule is usually 5 people maximum per bathroom. So that place needs at least
Mhm.
2 more bathrooms in our opinion.
Yes, yes. They have, like, for example, they have a dryer, but not a washer. But what's the point of a dryer without a washer?
Yeah, you would think you would at least have a washer and maybe not a dryer because
If
you
you have
could
a, yeah,
hang
exactly. If you had a washer, you could hang things up. Uh,
things.
but but here's the thing: they're booked.
Yep,
They're
that just
booked.
tells you what
So
this
why
market looks
change?
like. Yeah.
So why change?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is
why change?
crazy. Well, I will be very happy to see if you come up into the Michigan market because it seems like we are very in line with the standard that we hold our properties to.
Absolutely. It is and I fingers crossed that there are other people like us that are willing to pay appropriately for that experience.
Yes.
That's the hope, isn't it?
Yep, that's we're all crossing our fingers for that one.
That's the hope.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. It's so fun to talk to people who are so interested in the Midwest market like we are because we're so bullish on it and not everybody is. And so it's really exciting to talk about that. But for everybody who's listening, can you let them know where they can find you?
Absolutely. So our book direct website is yourfamiliesplace.com. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook. We're at yourfamiliesplace_. And that's a good place to follow along with what we're doing, keeping everybody updated on our construction, along with posting about our new houses. At our new house, we've installed 2 ponds, and they are in the very exciting process of slowly filling over time. So I'm a little obsessed with how full my ponds are. But we're also going to be putting in a waterfall that's going to connect the two ponds. I'm really going all in on this water feature because I think that that's a really great, unique selling point. So if you want to follow along with the construction of our new project, it's called Middle Haven. It's designed as an English cottage in the woods. One of my friends is from Wales. She lives around here. And so I passed my design through her to ask, is this English enough for you? So we're having a ton of fun putting together the design for that space. And we'd love to have people follow us on the update on that. If you want to email me, my email is rose@yourfamiliesplace, and I would love to talk to you. And if you have any great leads up in Northern Michigan, shoot them my way.
Yeah, and I will link everything in the bio of the video recording and the audio recording for you guys so you can easily find Rose and get a hold of her and follow along. Thank you so much again for coming on and talking to me. I had so much fun talking. So
Yeah,
thanks
thank you.
again for our
I love
listeners.
talking Michigan.
Yes,
And
we
yeah,
love
love
Michigan.
talking Michigan.
It's so fun for
I
somebody from
know.
Ohio to love Michigan because usually that
Yeah.
is not the case. There's a little bit of a rivalry
Oh,
between our states.
yeah, that's just a football thing.
I know, it really
That
is.
sells t-shirts. So, hey, you know what? Really good marketing on their part.
Really good
That's
marketing.
marketing. Good for
Yeah,
them.
absolutely. Well, thank you to our listeners for catching up with us, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Thank you. See ya.